right, gang, welcome back. Today we are going to talk about 2-note per string arpeggios. Let's do it. All right, so as you well know, if you've been following along, I'm a big fan of the cage system. But there are other systems, there are other ways to be able to view the guitar out there, and today we're going to talk about how you can see arpeggios with 2-note per string shapes. And what's cool about this is that it would end up being 2 notes on a string, very much like, say, a pentatonic scale or something like that. But what it will do is hopefully get you out of some of your boxes, some of your routine licks, and just be able to see the guitar a different way. Of course, before we get going, please like the video, and if you haven't already subscribed, please do so. And if you want to get the diagrams and tabs for this particular lesson, you can go down to my Patreon site there and sign up. There's all kinds of different tiers. There's over 100 preloaded lessons going already, and there's just a lot of great information there, and it really helps me to support the channel. So, all right, let's get started. So today we're going to take a look at G major 7. Now, of course, G major 7 could be also used in different situations too, like E minor. So like over the beginning there, I was jamming over an E minor backing track, but I was also blending in some of that G major 7th arpeggios, some of those 2-note per string shapes. And of course, you can always infiltrate it with some of the scale tones and just jump into E minor blues. There's all kinds of ways that you can use this. So let's take a look at some of the shapes. All right, so we're going to start, like I said, with a G major 7. We're going to start from the root, and we can actually play this arpeggio 4 different ways. We can play it from the root. We can play it as a first inversion from the major 3rd. We can play it as a second inversion from the 5th, and also a 3rd inversion from the major 7th. So let's start with the root. And since we're in the key of G, I'm going to go ahead and plant my root right here, and let's go ahead and make that the root. And on this same string right here, we can play the major 3rd here up on the 7th fret. So we got a little bit of a stretch, but it's kind of a cool sound. Now we can jump up to the 5th, which is on the next string here. So we've got, so what I usually do there is I just shift my first finger over, because I know I'm going to have another stretch here in a minute. So, okay, and then also 2 whole steps up from that 5th is the major 7th, and there you go. You got a 1, 3, 5 major 7, and that gives us a major 7th arpeggio. Okay, now the cool thing is right below the 5th here is another root tone, and we can just kind of structure the same pattern. And this is what's cool about it. You got 2 notes on a string, but you also have reoccurring patterns. And this can help you kind of get out of your typical box type shapes. All right, so far we've got. And then of course, you know, with the guitar, it's a little bit different when you go between the G and the B string. So that jump is going to be a little bit different than the other strings. But you know, again, we can maybe potentially take advantage of that. And that's kind of what our first shape looks like. So to me, there's a couple advantages here, and that is that it's reoccurring shapes. It's 2 notes on a string, so you could do things like hammer-ons and pull-offs. It also goes across the guitar, so you're starting on this low G note on the E string here, and you end up all the way up on this major 7th, this F sharp, up here on the 4th fret. So, man, it's a lot of ground to travel with this major 7th arpeggio. So that's super cool, and let's go ahead and jam a little bit of that shape over a track and see what it sounds like. All right, pretty cool. Of course, you don't just have to only play that shape, you can infiltrate it with some of your scale tones. And of course, I'm playing this G major 7 over an E minor. So that's going to kind of give me an E minor 9 sound, but I could also blend in some of the E minor blues or pentatonic. So you also have that advantage there too. All right, let's take a look at the next inversion. This will be from the major 3rd. Okay, so the major third of G would be B, and that can be found on the 7th fret of the low E string. And we're going to take that all the way up to the 5th, which in this case will be a D note, and then we can see the major 7th here, and this will be our root tone. I'm going to go ahead and set that as our root tone so we can see the intervals. So now we've got a 3, 5, 7, 1. This would be a first inversion. Basically the same notes, but just a different shape. And of course, that's going to also be another reoccurring 2 notes on a string type shape. So we've got another one of those here in the next octave, starting on the 3rd here. There's the 5th, here's the 7th, and there's the root. So same exact shape, right? All right. Now, of course, you know, always with that G and B string relationship on the guitar, things are always a little bit different here. So now we're just going to jump to the major 3rd here on the B string on the 12th fret, but then again we have that same exact shape again. Okay, so let's check that out. So we've got starting from B, the major 3rd, and you can see normally my strategy for these is that I like to shift my first finger over because it kind of sets up the next shape, right? So if you try to play this kind of grammatically correct like a classical fingering, you're going to kind of screw yourself a little bit because, you know, I suppose you could do something like this. You could do a 1, 4, and then a 3, 4, and then shift your finger over here. You could do it that way too. I tend to like to shift my first finger. It's just because when I first started playing, I was just kind of self-taught, and I probably learned some bad habits, but in some way I can use it to my advantage. So I shift my first finger over. And of course, if we play that against E minor, we're going to kind of get an E minor 9 type sound. This is one of my more familiar shapes that I'm actually a little bit more comfortable with. So let's check it out over a track. All right, so pretty hip, and you saw I was also started to add some of the other notes of the E minor scale, some E minor pentatonic, some E minor blues, so you can blend that in there. And of course, you can always add notes to these. I like these because because they're 2-note per string, I can do some of my typical kind of sequency kind of things that I like to do, like with a pentatonic scale. So that's kind of like a little pattern I might play with a pentatonic scale, which is 2 notes on a string. So I can also use that in my 2-note per string arpeggios. And so, you know, what you get is the ability to kind of say the same thing through 3 different octaves if you desire. And you can create little themes with this. This is why I kind of dig this little system, along with being able to traverse around the neck. And you can also use it to shift positions. So I think they're pretty hip. Let's go ahead and check out the second inversion, which would be starting from the 5th. All right, since we're in the key of G, the 5th would be D. We can find that here on the 12th fret of the low E string. And we're going to take that 2 whole steps up to the major 7th. And then we can play the root right below that D note, the 5th there, and we can play the major 3rd. So this is a very convenient shape here because it just kind of reoccurs right underneath. I'm going to go ahead and set my root here so we can kind of see the intervals. And we're starting from the 5th. We're taking that up to the major 7th, and then the root up to the major 3rd, so we get something like this, which is very handy. And of course, you can always infiltrate it with some of the other notes of the scale too. So then we're going to start here again from the 5th, same exact shape on the next 2 strings. So this is There's that same kind of pentatonic pattern that I played with the other shape, kind of that dee-doo-doo-dee-doo, you know, and it's really cool because you can do it with an actual major 7th arpeggio now. Okay, we're going to jump up to the 5th here, and what do you know, we have the exact same shape on these 2 strings here, so you can see how this crosses across the fretboard. Now this is where you can actually start to connect these shapes together. And this is kind of cool too. And you know, of course, like I said, you can always infiltrate it with other things like scale tones and pentatonics and so on and so forth. So this is a fun one because you can, you know, actually connect it with the other ones. You can infiltrate it with some of the other notes. And it's just a really handy shape. It feels good under the hands. All right, let's go ahead and check it out over the track, and I'll maybe try to connect it with some of the other shapes. Maybe add in some scale tones, add in some pentatonics, and just have some fun with it. All right, pretty cool. So just getting a little loose with it there, kind of going over the shape and then starting to blend it with some of the other shapes, add in some other scale tones, add in some pentatonics and some blues notes, and you got a pretty cool sound there and just a different way of seeing the guitar. Yeah, always a good thing to do to build up your vocabulary is be able to see the guitar as many different ways as possible. So as I mentioned before, you know, I'm a big fan of the cage system. If you follow along with me at all, I use that quite a bit. This is a different way of seeing the guitar, but you can also blend it with the cage system. So that's another thing to kind of pay attention to. And as time goes on, we'll get into some of the other arpeggios that are potentially here in this 2-note per string shape kind of based system. All right, let's look at our last but not least, the 3rd inversion starting from the major 7th. Let's do it. Okay, so a 3rd inversion arpeggio is starting from the 4th note or the 7th degree of the scale. In this case, I'm going to jump down rather than continue on because I'm starting to run out of room here on the neck. And that's just a product of being in the key of G. I'm going to jump down here and start from this F sharp tone right here. That's the major 7th of G. Here's our root tone, so I'm going to set that as our root. Here's our major 3rd, and here's our 5th. Now this is arguably one of my favorite shapes. I use this one quite a bit, but of course, like we mentioned before, we can pop that up an octave on the next set of strings, and we have the exact same notes with the exact same fingering. And then we can do that one more time here. And there's our 3rd inversion G major 7th arpeggio, 2 notes on a string. And again, you know, you can infiltrate it with some of the scale tones. I did even a little chromatics there. That's nice too. But you know, you get these with one of the things I love about these 2 notes on a string and these 3 octave shapes is you can kind of repeat your idea, you know, and it really allows you to kind of create a motif, if you will, in that particular sound. So again, I just connected it with one of the other shapes there too. So once you get these all over the neck, you can start connecting them together and use them to navigate around. And also, you know, like I mentioned, you can infiltrate it with some of the other scale tones. So let's check this sound out over a track. All right, pretty cool, and you can see I was starting to connect them to some of the other shapes. You see how nice and melodic it sounds, and of course that's also part of the track. I'm playing over this kind of nice melodic E minor rock track. But eventually, after you get these shapes down, you can start connecting them, and then you can also start adding in other scale tones, pentatonic scales, and it's just a real crafty way of seeing the guitar. And if you already know something like the Cage system, you can merge this with it and really have a great way to get around the guitar. One of the biggest things that I have with my students that ask me is like, how do I get out of these box patterns, you know? So once you kind of learn these Cage system box patterns, sometimes you feel like you're a little boxed in. So these little shapes here really allow you to kind of get outside of the typical boxes. But then of course, then you can also use the boxes in conjunction with it, right? So a really great system. So again, make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and please check out the Patreon site if you want to jump on board. There's all kinds of great stuff going on there. And of course, we're going to continue this series. We're going to take a look at our dominant sevenths, minor 7 flat 5s, different arpeggios, and also maybe start to apply them to different modes and so on and so forth. So hang in there, and I will see you soon.